mute. If they just like to mute themselves as well, please. It just stops a background noise and any dogs kicking off. Brilliant. Great stuff. Okay, so thank you very much indeed for inviting me to come and chat with you all this evening and share my passion about everything to do with plants. And from the lovely introduction Denise has just given you, you will know how we met. But I've got a little presentation for you this evening which explains a little bit more about what I do and about plant medicine in general. So just bear with me a second while I share my screen with you. There'll be a little bit of a thrashing around in a minute and hopefully not too much swearing because I hope it will come up quickly. And we don't have as many technical problems as we had previously. So let me, first of all, I'm going to stop my video because I have some videos within my presentation. I do find if I stop my video, then they run better. So let's stop that first. And then let me bring up my presentation. So here we go. So far, so good. Let's do a screen share there. And now everyone's disappeared off screen, which is usual for me. So Denise, could you just come back on and make sure that you can see the slide your end for me? I'm sorry if you can
see it.
Lovely. I was going to say, if you're giving me thumbs up, I can't see you.
No, I had to unmute myself. So yeah, you're good to go.
Good to go. Great. Thank you. So zoopharmacognosy. It's a really long word, and who on earth has ever heard of it? But let's just break it down a little bit. So zoo is animal, pharmaco is remedy, and gnosy is knowing. So basically, what zoopharmacognosy means is that the animal knows which remedy they need to choose to support them. And if you've not heard much about zoopharmacognosy before, the lady in the picture here is Canine Ingraham, who is the leading expert in animal self-medication. She founded Applied Zoopharmacognosy and has literally done most of the research that we've got behind essential oils being used with animals going forward in the way that we offer it as Applied Zoopharmacognosy. So I became really interested in zoopharmacognosy probably about 8 years ago, where I was invited to a dog club meeting, a little bit like what we're doing this evening. And it was a face-to-face meeting. And there was a gentleman called Mike Griffiths there, who was a qualified zoopharmacognosy practitioner. And Mike had us sit around and we talked about the different essential oils. He passed them around for us to sniff. And I think at the beginning was very much like Denise. I sat there with my arms folded in the front row, which must have been very challenging for poor Mike. But I sat there in the front row and thought, how can wafting a few essential oils around help an animal to heal itself or to help with emotional problems? So I listened to what he said very much with an open mind, and I became really interested in it. So I went off and I trained with Canine Ingraham, and I then did further training with Rachel Knott, who was a graduate of Caroline's, and I qualified a few years ago as a botanical self-healer for dogs. Now, I've kept that title because it's far more recognisable than zoopharmacognosy. Nobody can spell zoopharmacognosy, not many people can say it either, like I've just tripped up on it. So Caroline coined the term applied zoopharmacognosy, which she explained in her own words as a process by which an animal self-medicates and naturally forages plants and their essential oils, clays and other natural minerals. And Caroline spent over 30 years studying animals in the wild who self-medicate regularly on plants to bring themselves back to health or to support their health. So it's an innate ability that all living creatures have. They just know which plants to select through taste and smell. And when offered correctly to our dogs in our own homes, animals have this recognition. They know which plant to select, and We can choose those to ease anxious behaviours, combat infections, reduce inflammation, ease pain. The list goes on and on and on about the things that it can support. We as humans also have this ability, but over time, we've learnt, of course, not to listen to ourselves, and therefore we're missing a valuable healing modality. But we can absolutely come back to this. So let me just flip the slides over. My mouse has decided not to work. No. See, I love technology. Here we go, it's coming back now. So, can you just tell me, Denise, has that slide changed?
No.
It hasn't. Okay, bear with me a second while I can't mute myself, so I can't swear at it. I'll speak very nicely to my presentation. See whether it'll come back.
It was working just before we started this.
Isn't it just ironic for whatever reason? And I've, you know, the presentations I've done on Zoom now, it never surprises me what happens. Here we go. Oh, thank the Lord. Okay, here we go. Hopefully that has changed slides.
No.
It hasn't?
Yes, it has now.
Oh, phew.
Must have been a delay.
I'll give it delay in a minute. Right. Okay, so plant science. It's estimated that there are over 30 million plants on the earth, but we have only used about 1% and investigated them for their medical needs and their effects. And that is a real trick we're missing, because many plant remedies have absolutely no side effects and can be used really safely together. And, you know, we're told, aren't we, with our pharmaceutical drugs that you mustn't mix this with that, and you mustn't put this one with that one because there's going to be side effects, and, you know, you're going to drop off your twig or something awful. But that doesn't happen so much with plants. We do have to be careful with some, but they can often be used safely together. So 25% of all prescription drugs are derived from plants. So that's either wholly or in their individual components. And up until about 70 to 100 years ago, all we had was herbal medicine. We had no pharmaceuticals that were there to help us, and we had to rely on plants to make us well. So 30 to 40% of doctors in France and Germany are estimated to use herbs even today as a primary medicine. And I'd be really interested to know that, you know, how many, apart from the integrative practitioners we have within our country, how many doctors actually offer herbal medicine first line? Not very many, I wouldn't have thought. So herbal medicine is used by about 70% of the developed world. And for those that are not so advanced, herbs are still a primary medicine. And plants, of course, have many, many uses, from disinfectants right through to spiritual ceremonies and pretty much everything in between. And plant medicine is just so versatile. It can be derived from all parts of the plant. So flowers, leaves, bark, roots, fruit. And of course, above all, it's sustainable. It's important that any plant extracts are sourced ethically and are of the highest standard and quality. That's really, really important. So anything that we use with our animals has to be of the highest quality. And this is definitely something where you get what you pay for. So cheap products are often diluted with water or very low-grade alcohols, which of course are not going to do our dogs any good at all if we're offering them by inhalation, and could actually be harmful. So let's move on to our next slide. The nose. So for the purposes of botanical work, it's important to understand that sniffing is different to smelling. And the way that we look at that is very different within zoopharmacognosy. And I don't know whether anybody has come across the TED Talk, which all talks about dogs' olfactory system and how it actually works. It's called How the Dog Smells. And if you haven't seen it, it's really worth going and having a look at that. I can drop the link into the chat later, which will help you to understand the whole mechanics of how the dog smells. But dogs have got about 30 million scent receptors in their nose, and we have a measly 5 million. So although we may feel that we can smell lots and lots of different scents, a dog beats us hand down. I mean, 30 million scent receptors, it's gonna have a huge advantage on us. And when they sniff, the nostrils flare and the aromatic molecules are passed directly into the bloodstream via the lungs. So often if you see a dog, maybe you've got a slightly anxious dog, they'll stop in the environment and they'll sniff. And their nostrils will flare and they'll be taking in all these aromatics of things that are flying past them, just really to make sense of what's going on in their environment. But what happens with all those smells and the stuff that we use in botanical healing, it goes straight in to the bloodstream via the lungs. So with smelling, dogs often engage the vominonasal organ, or Jacobson's organ, which you may or may not have heard of before, but it's an organ which is on the roof of the mouth, just at the back of the tongue, which when the dog accesses the Jacobson organ, there's no flaring of the nostrils, so it's a slightly different way of working for them. But what happens is they take in trace amounts of aromatic molecules and they enter the bloodstream, and within a second, literally, they have a direct impact in the limbic system in the brain, which we know is involved with memory and emotion. So often a dog will select an essential oil or a hydrosol, which we'll look at in a minute, via the mouth. They may ask for application via the skin or directly over an artery to bring them back to physical health. But when they're smelling and those aromatic molecules go straight to the limbic system, they're often selecting there for anxiety, fear, or trigger behaviours, because there is a direct hit where they can get some sort of relief from what's happening to them. So if we actually get the right aromatic, the right time, at the very first time, the behaviour can change immediately. So we can go from having a very anxious dog to having one that gently soothes and gently just lies down. So how does plant medicine work? So it's based on the sensory modulation theory. And there are many theories to explain how this may work. But this little graph diagram here is really a simplistic form, which I found really helpful for me when I started to understand about zoopharmacognosy and botanical work. That it's the pleasantness of plant compounds that changes in order for the dog to be able to access them and to change their health or their behaviour. So if we start with the graph, we start in the top left-hand corner, which is a problem with the body. So let's say, for instance, that your dog has picked up a bacterial infection. So he's not very well. He might have a cough. It might be kennel cough, something like that. So a signal is sent by the body from the distressed area, say the lungs, in this case, possibly kennel cough, that improves the signal of the pleasantness of the suitable plant materials within an essential oil that we're offering. So, for instance, for a bacterial infection, it's probably likely that the white blood cells will be sending this information and will signal the aroma of antibacterial plants, perhaps something like garlic or thyme, to be far more appealing, because that's what's needed in the body at that time to right that particular physical ailment. So the animal then ingests the appropriate medical compounds, say garlic or thyme, either by inhalation or it might be by a powdered herb. And they ingest that much of that plant until a problem is resolved, until the signals are no longer sent by that distressed area. So the white blood cells no longer send the signal to say that we've got a problem. And the animal's tastes and preferences for smell revert back to normal. So they're not then wanting those medicinal compounds. And if an animal was injured, it would be a similar process. So the signal would probably be that they need some sort of painkilling or anti-inflammatory process to go on for them. So the improvement of the pleasantness of things like wintergreen or yarrow may be made more attractive, that they then ingest for the time that they need to until a problem is resolved. So that's a really basic explanation of what happens. And we can see that in the situations of the consultations that we do together, where we can offer a dog a plant extract. They will sniff it until they need to no longer sniff it, and then they will turn away or they will walk away. So why did I choose to study botanical healing? So this is my why. This is Bradstock, my English Springer, who's now 14. He came to live with me and my then 10-year-old daughter, and he was typically high energy, you know, a Springer Spaniel. But at 6 months old, I realised Bradstock wasn't quite normal. The behaviours that he was showing me were, in fact, a little bit compulsive. So I worked with a behaviourist, and we clinically had a diagnosis of canine compulsive disorder from him. And the journey from then until now with Bradstock has been very interesting, having a compulsive dog. But through management and supplements and diet, I've managed to keep him pharmaceutical drug free. There is a big push at the moment for dogs that are very anxious to be put on things like Prozac. And sometimes that is absolutely necessary, but sometimes we can manage them and keep them pharmaceutical free. And the two main game changers for Bradstock have been plant medicine and ACE-free work. So if anybody's heard of Sarah Fisher's ACE-free work, that's something else that I do too, and complete game changer. But Bradstock started me on my journey with the plants, and he continues to be my biggest teacher to date. He looks very sweet there, but he's still and he's quiet. And at 14, he's still on the go. Love him. So how do I work? So I would probably describe myself as working quite differently to most. I have a background and I've had a career in veterinary nursing. So I have an understanding of the medical conditions that a client may be seeking help with. I've got a qualification in behaviour and training, which allows me to offer solutions and management, sometimes if that's needed as well. I'm first aid trained because emergencies absolutely can happen. We can have people being allergic to some of the plant extracts. We can have dogs that sometimes have a sensitivity or a reaction to them. So first aid is really, really important for me to know. I have several healing modalities in my toolbox. And we know definitely with our more anxious, sensitive dogs that one size definitely does not fit all. So I haven't just got the botanicals in my toolbox. I've got ACE, I've got colour therapy, sound therapy as well. So lots of things that can help our sensitive dogs. I work alongside the guardian to provide support for their dog, and also to work alongside vets and other healthcare professionals, because we're not a standalone entity. Our dogs, if they are sensitive, often need a multimodal approach. So I will work with your vet or with other healthcare professionals if you have that multimodal approach going on. And I use free work to give total freedom and choice, and as a way to process the sessions as we go through, which you'll see on some slides coming up. And my philosophy with all of this is that I support you, the client, to assist your dog to be the very best versions of themselves. And we know, don't we, that we all like to think we've got perfect dogs, but what is a perfect dog? The reality is very different sometimes. We want to get the very best version of the dog that we've got in front of us. So what plant medicine do I use? So I use dried herbs, clays and nutrients, which can be taken by mouth. They tend to be selected more for the nutritional or mineral imbalances within the body. But we then have the options of hydrosols, which are a beautiful, gentle aromatic, which actually are a byproduct of essential oil making, but no lesser in their medicinal compounds. So when you make essential oil, you put all the plant material that you wish to get the oil from into a big vat. You blow steam through it, and as the steam condensates, the oil floats to the surface. We skim that oil off and bottle it, and that's the essential oil you often see in bottles, in chemists and that type of thing. But then we've got all this beautiful water that's left behind, which has got all the plant compounds in, which years ago was just literally flushed down the drain. But we now understand that those waters, or hydrosols as they're known, have therapeutic values in their own. So I will often offer hydrosols to dogs which are very young, very old, or have got complex medical needs, because they're a gentler approach. I then use essential oils. So this is the most aromatic part of the plant, and it needs to be used really, really mindfully. I'm sure you've had experience with essential oils over the years, and you'll know how strong they are. And if you take the lid off and you sniff really, really strongly from the bottle, then you can often end up coughing and sneezing and what have you. And if you think our dogs' smell receptors are so much more acute than ours, if you offer an essential oil right up close to your dog without being mindful of watching body language and just following a process, then you can get the same response. And the problem can be then that you disconnect the process. So rather than the dog being curious about what might happen in a session, they're actually don't want to have anything to do with it because it's too strong and it was offered too quickly. So there is definitely a process that we need to go through. So how to offer plant extracts. So I've got a little video to show you here, which hopefully was running beautifully before we started. So I hope again it will run now. So let me just click that on. So this little dog in the right of the picture is a frequent flyer. He's one of my clients that I've worked with in person for a long, long time. He's an older gentleman. He's had bilateral knee surgery, and he often gets very stiff on his hind legs. He's offered pain medication from his vets, and he's given an injection once a month. But sadly, at about week 3, his pain starts to break through. So we offer him sessions just to tide him over until he can get to his next appointment. So here I'm offering him a selection of herbs and minerals just to see whether he would like to top up with anything there. So when they've finished with their herbal selection, we can then offer them hydrosols. And I know this little chap likes to take his hydrosols by mouth. So I put a little drop of a hydrosol in a bowl for him, and I'm just offering it down for him to take if he wishes. There's absolutely free choice here. There is no keeping the dog on a lead or making them have it. It's completely by choice. And then we move on to the essential oils. And here the guardian is offering the essential oil to the dog and herself. Because I always encourage you having a sniff of them as well, just to see if you like them. Because often what you like, the dog will like as well. And then when he's had enough, he just lies down. So sometimes our dogs say, no, thank you. I don't want to work with that particular botanical. So again, this is another dog I've worked with in person. He's very, very anxious. As you can see, he's pacing. So I ask his guardian to offer. So she offers this essential oil and he just bypasses. He keeps walking. That's clearly not one he wants to engage with at that point. So there are clear yes and no signals that we look for in a session to whether a dog is happy to work with a particular aromatic or not. So some behaviours that you might see within a session. So this little lad was a Romanian street dog rescue brought over in COVID, and he was completely shut down, completely. And this is the first time after we'd offered some aromatics that the guardian had seen him play. So on the floor, we offered him some rosebuds, which is very good for young dogs, which is what he is. And he started to play, which was beautiful. She hadn't seen that before. He has a snuffle mat that he can go and process. So if he wants to go off into the other part of the room to just go and process and just take everything on board he can do, and just take a little bit of time out from the session. But then the guardian is now offering him an aromatic on just a little piece of cloth. And you can see how close he comes up to have a sniff, and he starts to lip lick. Another little dog that I was working with here, very keen to sniff the cloth. But then she started to cover it and she started to bury it, which is something else we can see in sessions sometimes. And there are several schools of thought about why this might happen. Sometimes it's thought that perhaps it might be a resource for the dog and they're covering it for use later on. Or maybe the aromatic's a little bit strong, so they're just covering it to lower that aroma. And then what we can often see when we're offering aromatics is deep processing and twitching. So I'm not sure how much you can see, so it's not terribly clear on this, but this little dog's doing a lot of nose twitching. His whiskers are moving independently. He's absolutely flat out fast asleep at this point. His little paws are starting to twitch. The guardian there is just giving me a running commentary of what's happening. He's very relaxed he is, but big body twitches. And that can be emotion starting to move through our dogs. This is another girl that was brought over during COVID. Again, another very anxious dog. She's had a little sniff of her aromatic there and she's just processing. She's lip licking, she's yawning, just having another little sniff. Very still body language. And a big burp. She was actually using a digestive oil there because there was problems with her digestion. So that had clearly moved things on for her. But she's very still, as you can see, that body language. And that often is what happens. They will turn away from the bottle, they will move back to the bottle, and they will inhale as much as they need to. And she inhaled until she no longer needed that aromatic, and then she jumped down off the couch and went and sat in her bed, which was on the floor. So if I've piqued your interest a little bit tonight about botanical self-healing, how would you go about offering a botanical self-healing session to your dog? Well, you don't have to be qualified. That's the first thing. You can offer a session to your dog in your home without being qualified. But what you will need is a selection of really good quality essential oils, hydrosols, and herbs. And good quality would be ones that you would buy from a reliable source. So we've often seen essential oils in chemists and on market stalls, that type of thing, that will probably be, £4 or £5 a bottle. They're not the quality that you need to be using. You need to be using a practitioner grade quality, because we need to make sure that any of the products that we're going to be using are not a problem to the dog at all by having been adulterated with maybe alcohol or ethers or things like that, which often these essential oils are diluted with in order to make them more affordable for us to buy just for everyday use. So you'll also need a knowledge of how to offer the plant extracts and what feedback signals you're going to be looking at from your dog to tell you how that session is going. And that can be done through lots of different ways. You can attend in-person workshops. You can watch things online. Often practitioners now have short courses online, or you can book a session with a qualified practitioner and they'll be able to guide you through the process. And I would suggest that if you've had an issue running for some time, or you have a dog who's very anxious or fearful, that it might just be worth having someone professional to guide you through those first processes, so you start to understand what your dog may be telling you. Because sometimes we may feel that a dog will need to work with fear, if that's what the presenting symptoms are. But actually, if they've got a problem physically with their body, they may need to work with that first. So we need to just gauge what the dog actually needs. So you can absolutely offer the sessions to your dog, but you might need a little bit of information first. So let me just go through to the last slide of the session. Now, you might recognise this lady on this slide, because this is when I was working with Denise and Jana. And what's really important, I think, for us to take home from this is that when we're working with the aromatics with the dog, we're not just working with the dog. You and your family and anybody, your other dogs in the airspace are also going to be working with that scent, because we're not just going to be using it with that one dog. If it's in the airspace, we're going to be inhaling it, so are our family members. So I always invite the clients that I work with to get a bit of a flavour of what the dog might be experiencing during a session. So I get them to have a smell of aromatics as well. So let me just run this little sequence, and it has audio with it. So Denise, if you can't hear the audio, perhaps you'd flag it up, but I'll run it now and let's see.
Interesting. If you've got the bottles by you at the minute, Andy, if you just get those bottles out that we've used, so you can just have a sniff of them yourself and see whether there's any that particularly appeal to you, or you look at it, oh God, that's vile. Now, what have you got there?
That's yarrow.
Okay.
Now, about Christ, I don't like that. No, I like that.
Yeah.
I really like that yarrow, but I didn't like it to start with.
Now that's interesting, because I used a word when we were offering it to Yana, which was conflict. And that's almost what you've just told me. Yes, I like, oh no, I don't. Well, I do. Oh, do I? You know, and that's sort of conflicting information that it gives you.
Yeah, I had to. No, and then I thought, what does it smell like, Denise? Oh, it smells like urine. Does it?
Okay.
And then I went, no, it reminds me of a smell when I was a kid, and my granny paid for me to go to Highland dancing lessons.
Oh, beautiful.
And it reminded me of the smell it was in the hall, and then it didn't. No, it was really weird.
Okay.
So then I started, and I had a big sigh.
Yeah. Now that is a perfect example of exactly what the dog experiences as I see it. The fact that it can take you back to a memory which reminds you of something, which is exactly what yarrow does, because it's a healer of the past. And, you know, for you, whether there was anything around Highland dancing that you didn't particularly enjoy, or, you know, that sort of thing, or whether it was remembered things about Granny, I don't know, but it's interesting how it sort of takes you back.
Mm. Just sit and sniff at a night.
Yeah. And you could make yourself a cloth of your own.
Stop making me a yarrow junkie.
Yes, I'll be known as a pusher next. You watch.
Yeah. You'll be out there with your BMW.
Do you know what? I quite fancy one of those BMWs with dark windows. That would just suit my persona. Be fantastic. You'll see me cruising with my arm out the window, my shades on.
Pimp my ride.
Yes, pimp my ride.
And that is just a little bit of fun at the end of our slideshow, but can actually show you what scents can do, because I don't know whether Denise can remember back to our session, but it'd been a fairly serious session. We'd done lots of work with Jana, and we started off by being really sensible when we were doing that scent test. But actually, we ended up laughing and rolling about in our chairs, really. And that can be the power of scent. So let me stop my share now. Just come back onto screen and see if we've got any questions or anything, any comments or...
Feel free, people, to unmute yourself, ask questions.
Yeah, I've got a question. Tracy, if I may. Is there a general? My dog is not aggressive or nervous, but is there anything that you would specifically recommend, just to kind of start out with, and to, you know, which kind of direction of scent? Is there something like for beginners to see if they like it or not, or like something that you could try before I buy 20 essential oils and spend hundreds of pounds?
Absolutely. There are a few scents that are good to have, like a first aid kit, I guess, which is a good starting point, because even if your dog doesn't have any emotional issues, they may just need a bit of support with their health as they go through their different life stages, because, you know, we know puppies and adolescent dogs can be a bit accident prone. You know, they might get a bit of a bang here and there, and you might need some painkilling or anti-inflammatory properties. And as our dogs go through life, if they've been neutered, there may be some hormonal support that we could offer them. As they get into sort of going into their older years, then there might be some mobility issues that crop up their ugly heads indeed. So what I could do actually afterwards in the chat is just pop down a little list of things that might be worth just having to have by you as a starter kit, for want of a better word, that would just serve to see whether there is anything that your dog would like to select.
Perfect. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Because you can indeed get carried away. I obviously hold quite a kit of stuff, but I'm like a kid in a sweet shop. If new comes up on one of my wholesaler pages, I'm all over it like a rash. And it's like, oh, a new essential oil, great, and I've got to buy it. And I've probably got several oils that do the same thing, but they're from different plants. So yeah, you can really get carried away, and you can spend a fortune. So yeah. Yeah, let's just have a few to start off with. Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I ask if there's sort of like different scents for dogs at different ages? I have a 15-and-a-half-year-old and also a 22-month-old pup.
Yeah.
And I'm just interested, would both of them consider the same scent differently, do you think?
It's certainly possible, because essential oils and aromatics are multimodal, so they have a plant chemistry. So depending on what is in their chemical makeup will make it either one that's most suitable, say, for pain and inflammation, or if they've got different components within them, it might make them more susceptible, maybe to say be antibacterial, but they have both of those components within the one plant or the one aromatic. So yes, your older dog might very well select maybe say yarrow for pain-killing and anti-inflammatory properties, but for your younger dog, she may select it for maybe some emotional issue that would be going on with her. So it is multimodal. So yes, is the answer to your question. They can select it for both.
It's interesting. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Anybody else any questions?
I'm very much into research and things. So are there books that I could get hold of that would help?
There are books, Jill. They're
Right.
mainly this research has been done on humans. So I have a book which is more like an offensive weapon, to be honest. It's huge. It's not what I would call put in your handbag type of book. It's massive, but it's got the breakdown of the components of most essential oils you'll find out there on the market. And then that can be teamed up with a set of really good books that I can again pop in the chat or pop on the Facebook page afterwards, which can give you more of the insight to how animals might work with them. But yes, there is plenty of research out there, and honestly, it is in depth, the one book. So I'm sure you'll find everything you need in there. But it's a really good question, because we should never go into these things without having done some research. without knowing what we're doing, without looking at the essential oils or the hydrosols that we're going to offer. So we have a little bit of a knowing about what they might be used for.
Yeah.
And, you know, that is really, really important. So great. Yeah, great job. Bit of research.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome.
Yeah, when you were talking about that little clip, obviously it was a whole session with Yana, and the thing was, she was sitting up beside me, which she never did before, and she also fell asleep beside me again, which she'd never done before, after she'd had her essential oils, and there was a difference in her the next day. And I was skeptical of it, like I said, but it certainly has helped Yana. And there's been a few folk, like I said, there's been big changes in their dogs using it. It was really weird when it's funny when you first smelt the yarrow, took it away, the smell seemed to change. How, like, funny you were saying about conflict. Yeah, it was not long after a lot of conflict in my life. It was unresolved. So
Right.
you weren't wrong.
Mm.
Mhm.
And there is so many different layers to all of these aromatics that we use. I often find that dogs need to tap into an emotional level for the essential oils, just because dogs have to live with us, and that must be really, really interesting for them sometimes. You know, it must be a very, very interesting world for a dog to come into, to live with us, particularly during COVID, where the dogs came over from foreign street rescues, came into a home that they'd never done before. They were expected to integrate into a family, to go out for a walk, behave beautifully. And of course, it just wasn't that beautiful story that we all wanted. It was, in fact, very much the opposite. And some of the emotional problems that dogs have been left with as a result of that have been quite severe. And this is often where we can start a dialogue, and we can start a conversation with these dogs, really, that they can't do physically at the time. You know, they can't approach us because they're too frightened. One of the little dogs on the clip there was a dog that, when she was brought over, she was given the story, of course, that this dog was coming over. It was beautifully socialized and had lived in a house, and it had been with people. And, you know, as soon as she arrived in the house, she sat behind the sofa, and she didn't come out from behind the sofa for 3 months. And the guardian couldn't get anywhere near her to try and even do any training. And this is where the botanicals really help, because we were able to start a conversation in her words, really, because it's through the language of smell, through the language of scent, that we managed just to offer a few of these botanicals that the owner could just leave on a cloth in the room and then leave, because the poor dog couldn't even eat in front of her guardian at that point. And gradually, we managed to unpack some of this anxiety for her. And one of the sessions that I was due to do with a guardian, we came on camera, and there was the dog sat behind her on the sofa. It was like, oh, when did that happen? And this had all been as a part of just emotionally unpacking, and obviously a lot of work on the guardian's front as well. And then she sent me a message on WhatsApp to say she went out for her first walk. She's been on the beach. Beautiful story. Beautiful story.
It was a funny thing as well, Rosie, she's got pseudonomes in her ears, which are a bugger to get rid of. If you don't know, I hope your dog never gets it. And I've been trying everything. She's unfortunately got really bad ears, and read in, was it Carol Ingram's book I've got oregano helping. And So I got the oregano and I let her sniff it and what have you. And within 4 days, her ears looked a lot better just for her sniffing, and that never happened before. She still requires other treatment for the pseudomonas, but the oregano helps. It supports her feeling more comfortable because she's 11 and I don't want to put her under an operation, because the next option is something that's called a pseudomonas bath, which involves flushing the ear out with several different fluids, one of them being acid. Or I go for an ablation and get her ears taken out. And at 11, do I want to put my dog through that? No, I don't. So my plan is to keep her as comfortable as possible, because I reckon, I think the vet said the pseudomonas bath is a relative new thing, but I mean, how flushing your dog's ear with acid and a few other things, I think that's going to leave her inner ears pretty painful. So I just want to keep, so she gets her oregano and she gets her ear drops, and it's keeping things on a manageable level for her. She doesn't itch, she doesn't shake, but I've just got to live with the fact she's got this. You can't, and there's nothing to get rid of them yet. But they got worse the older she got. So it's over the past couple of years, it's been a lot worse than what it was before. Her ears were fine, but now it's like it's a daily battle, basically, to keep on top. But the oregano does support her. So it's certainly something worth looking at. Even stuff like, because I was quite gobsmacked. Because I remember I messaged you and said, oh my God, just, 4 days in and her ears are looking much better. And that was the only change, was the oregano.
Yeah. And pseudomonas was one of the things in vet practice, when I worked in vet practice, that we used to go, oh no, pseudomonas, because it is so hard to get rid of, even with antibiotics, very antibiotic resistant. So if we've got something natural that'll help.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely. It's much better if you can go the natural route, I think. All depends what's going on, but if you can help them and support them, what's there.
Yeah. Have we got any other questions, or else I'm going to pose another one to you to have a think about?
Go on then.
Okay, you ready? Can I just have a show of hands for those people that are on camera, of anybody that uses a diffuser or a plug-in or reeds?
No, under no circumstances.
One or two, absolutely. And you know what? We all like our house to be smelling nice, don't we? Absolutely. But something that I'll just drop in for you to think about. When we're using things in our environment, and that also goes as far as perfumes, deodorants, aftershave, hairspray, that our dogs have no choice but to inhale that. Absolutely no choice at all. And how pure are those products that we're using, particularly with the plugins, particularly with the diffusers?
I use a diffuser, but I use the
essential oils.
The top grade essential oils.
Absolutely. So the zoo pharmacognosy camp is split to whether a diffuser with pure essential oils in is okay or it's not okay. The camp that say, yes, it's okay, is that you're using a diffuser in a room where the dog can leave. So it can literally get off the sofa, leave, go out into the kitchen or what have you, where it's got a comfy bed somewhere else it can sleep if it wants. to take itself away from the smell if it's not one that is needed by that dog. The other part of the camp says on absolutely no way should you ever be using diffusers, plugins, reeds, that type of thing. Now, I'm a little bit on the fence because I believe, yes, if your dog can get away and you enjoy diffusing something which brings you some stress relief, then that's going to help because our dogs pick up on our stress. So if that helps you and the dog can leave, then that's absolutely fine. Where the problems come and where you may have seen things in the press or on the internet is a little dog about 4 years ago. Jack Russell Terrier was in a room with a diffuser going with tea tree oil in. Now, tea tree oil is not one that I regularly use for dogs. It can be used if I need to, but it's not regularly used. And this little dog was in quite a small sitting room, and the guardian had gone off to work and left the dog sat in the living room, door shut, window shut. When she come home from work, it was dead, and it had been poisoned by the tea tree. And it had scientific tests and what have you done, because they wanted just to prove one way or the other whether the essential oil could possibly have done this. And it was deemed to definitely, yes, this is what has caused the poor dog's demise. Now, that is because he couldn't leave. He couldn't get out of that room, and it had built up into such levels in the atmosphere, in the oxygen, that there was probably more tea tree than there was oxygen at the end of the day. So if you are using diffusers and reeds and plugins and that type of thing, my invitation to you is to just be mindful about where your dog is within the room, and can it leave if it needs to. And if it's possible, have a window open when you're diffusing. May not be that comfortable up in Scotland in the middle of winter to have your windows open, may not be in the middle of summer either, but it will at least be a little bit of fresh air coming in as well, which can help to dilute the things. So it's just an invitation, and my last thing just to leave with you really, unless anybody's got any other questions. And Pamela's dog's come to say hello.
Well, when I was years ago, when I was amongst horses and tea tree oil first hit the scenes, everybody was using it for everything, and it was good stuff and it seemed to work. But then it came out that tea tree oil was actually poisonous to horses.
Mm-hmm.
So I would, why would it not be poisonous to other animals?
Yeah, absolutely. And, all of these things, every one of us, every one of our dogs will have different sensitivities. So what might be fine for me might not be fine for Denise, might not be fine for you all sat here tonight. Same with our dogs, might be fine for my dogs, but not for yours. So everyone is individual. There are some essential oils that I wouldn't use with dogs. And definitely there are a list for dogs that are on pharmaceutical medication. That's where you do have to be really careful. So if your dog is on pharmaceutical medication, please always check with a qualified practitioner that whatever you're going to use or you're going to offer to your dog is suitable for that condition, because there are ones that really shouldn't be used, particularly in epilepsy. That's a biggie, particularly in pregnancy, if you've got a pregnant dog. And in fact, if you are pregnant as well, you just need to be a little bit mindful of what you're using. On the whole, they're pretty safe, and safe if used in the right way. Like everything in life. Your chair can be dangerous if you don't sit on it properly.
Very true.
I've got one of these beautiful office chairs that it has a gas strut in it. And every so often I will disappear off screen as my gas strut goes down. So I'm really, really appreciative my gas strut has held up this evening.
Is that too?
That would given us all a laugh, if nothing else.
Absolutely. And that's what life's about. And that's what Botanical should be about, because you could see in our little clip that both Denise and I were left giggling at the end, which often happens on session.
Oh, so it should. I mean, we need to take things a lot lighter.
Yeah.
And Maybe it was the effect of the arrow, I don't know.
Indeed. Who knows?
I had fun. Anyway, this is the main thing. Selfish me.
Yeah. So shall I send you a list, Denise, of the things that we chatted about tonight that I said I'd drop in? You can pop them in the Facebook group. Is that do under the recording?
Yeah, that'd be fine. We'll do that.
Do that.
I was going to say, yeah, I got, is it Carl Ingram's book, Help Your Dog Heal Yourself, isn't it?
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll pop the book names that I recommend as well in and that scientific title for you, Jill.
Thank you.
No problem. Good luck with that.
Oh, well, hope you all enjoyed that.
Very much.
Yes,
Thank
no.
you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, really.
It's something a bit different, and it gives you, I think, some sort of food for thought about how we look after our dogs and ourselves, of course.
Mhm.
Yeah, because if you think about it, lots of our medication comes from plants. Aspirin, digoxin.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm very wary of foxgloves because I don't want to touch them. I could end up having a heart attack. A lot of people don't know that, though.
Yeah.
That's
And
where
it's
they come
interesting,
from.
isn't it, that often the whole plant is not going to be a problem, but it's when you start taking the individual components out that they use for medication, that's when it can start causing a problem, because you haven't, the whole plant has got things which will counteract other things within it. And when you start extracting the individual components, that's when you can start getting, but you know, digoxin is great. We need it for some things.
Well, look at cannabis. I mean,
Yes.
you look at it, just a plant,
Hmm.
and then folk do stuff to it. It's got this, is it THC
Yeah.
or TCH or something, whatever it is.
That, Denise, is a whole different Zoom.
That certainly is.
Which we could do, yes.
Yeah. Backy Zoom.
Good old Zoom. Brilliant.
Okay.
What I can also do, Denise, is drop my contact details. So if anybody's got any questions that they think of after the event, then please, by all means, feel free to email me. Or if you've got anything specific that you want to know about something for your own dogs, then please just get in touch. I'll be happy to help if I can.
Great.
Tracy's really good at helping, letting you know about things like that. So yes, she's always worth having on speed dial.
Even if it's only for alternative Zooms.
Join us next week. We'll be dissecting a cannabis plant.
I could give you a Zoom on plant music.
On plant what?
Indeed, plant music. I have a little machine that
Oh,
can attach to plants to hear their resonance and the
wow.
beautiful voices they have. So if anybody's interested in that at any point, then we can do
I
that.
thought you said plant mutiny.
Uh,
I thought I had visions of like Dave the Triffids.
yes, we could do a screaming. No, music, not mutiny.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But thank you very much for inviting me to share my passion. I can go on for hours, but I won't. But yeah, thank you for letting me come and chat.
Most interesting.
I hope you enjoyed it, and I have recorded it, so if you want a copy, pop my line and I'll send it to you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, right, folks, we'll see you later. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Bye.
So how do you think that went? I thought we'd have got more people, but
Let me
it wasn't
just,
too bad.
yeah, that's fine. I'm sorry, I'm just getting rid of a report. Why has that come up? Don't report. No, don't report. There we go. Yeah. Oh, I think it was great. And that was, do you know what? I always think, Denise, of these things is